Hey dorks! In 1987, Apple released the Macintosh II, introducing a bevy of changes to the platform. It was the first Mac to implement expansion slots. It was the first Mac to not be an all-in-one computer. But most importantly, it was the first Mac with color. All of these firsts came with a price tag though, an eye-watering $5,500 1987 US dollars, $15,483 today in 2025. 1988 saw an enhanced edition, Macintosh 2X, released for even more money, and 1989 brought the further enhanced 2CX and 2CI, both still well above the $5,000 mark. If you wanted a color Mac, you were going to pay for the privilege. That is, until late 1990, which saw the release of the Macintosh LC. LC stood for low cost, and while it did cost a lot less than the Macintosh 2 line at $2,500, it was introduced alongside the Macintosh Classic, which was a black and white compact Mac selling for $1,000, and the latest in the 2 line, the 2SI, at $3,800. $2,500 was still quite a chunk of change, and this isn't even taking into account that you'd also need a monitor, which was a few hundred minimum. The LC brought along several limitations compared to the Macintosh 2 line, most notably using a 68020 CPU instead of the 68030 the 2 line had been standardized on since the 2X in 1988. Memory was also limited on the LC, with 2 megs coming on board and 2 SIM slots giving you a maximum of 10 megs of RAM if you use 2 4 meg SIMs. Larger SIMs can be used, but the system will only let you access 10. 10 or even 8 megs of RAM in 1990 was really nothing to sneeze at, so it wasn't that big of a limitation at the time. To max out the machine at 10 megs, it could cost nearly $1,000 for 2 4 meg SIMs. The weird limitations on the memory for the LC is definitely something that makes these a compromised machine to a vintage collector, but back then it wasn't that big of a deal. The perceived limitations of the LC at the time of its release were a bit different. Writers lamented the lack of the MMU, rendering it incapable of running AUX, which was Apple's weird Mac-Unix hybrid, which at the time was seen as the future of the Mac. Kind of, but different, I guess. Aside from color and price, the big selling point of the LC was the integration of the microphone. Apple was really pushing audio recording as the future of computing. While these little mics weren't lighting the world on fire, they did make it possible to replace the system beep with a fart of your own creation. The same event that unveiled the LC also brought out the Apple IIe option card, which was an entire Apple IIe on a card made to fit right into the processor direct slot on the LC. This card paired with an LC sold with an educational discount would see LCs heavily deployed in schools. In 1991, my school had a bunch of pluses and SEs, along with one LC in the library hooked up to an external CD-ROM for looking things up in the digital encyclopedia. After a little more than a year on the market, Apple dropped the price of the LC by nearly $1,000 to $1,550 for the base model, or $2,050 for the top spec version. This made the machine far more interesting for everyday folks. Then only a few months later, in April 1992, Apple announced and released the new Macintosh LC II. The new generation of LC looked great on paper. It increased the onboard RAM from 2 to 4 megs. It came with larger hard drives, and the CPU was replaced with the 68030. The original LC was discontinued, and these machines replaced them in Apple's product lineup for the same price of $1,550 for the base model. One of the shortcomings that was not overcome with this upgrade was the 16-bit data bus and the 10 meg RAM limitation. Memory prices also dropped during this period, and 4 meg SIMs dropped from $500 to $150, making it a much more affordable proposition to max out the machine. Benchmarks showed that the new machines performed nearly identically to the original LC, making the higher-end equipment look like a decent value with no real improvements. The LC II we're going to look at today spent much of its life in a barn and came to me with a pencil marking denoting its condition as super gross. It's mostly just full of dust, rust, pine needles, and capacitor goo. It looks like this one just has the base 4 megs of RAM. There's no hard drive, and it looks like the floppy drive has been pilfered as well. The oily spot in the top left is a bunch of leaked electrolyte from the capacitors. There's a forest of them up there. It also appears that there's a 512K VRAM SIM, so it looks like this was the top spec system. This power supply looks really sketchy. The housing is damaged enough that I don't feel comfortable powering this on. Luckily, I have some alternatives. So many pine needles. Everything in this machine is held in with plastic clips, and I just have to be really careful not to break them off as I pull the components out. This board is disgusting. Let's throw it in the ultrasonic cleaner. Wow, what a difference that made. It looks brand new aside from the rusty video connector. Let's address this nasty case. I'm going to clip out the plastic rivets holding on the RF shield. I'm not a big fan of these things, so I'm just going to throw them out once I get them removed. I'm just using warm water and dish soap for this job, and I'll gently use a magic eraser on anything that doesn't want to come off with the soap. These lines at the top and sides of the case can really accumulate a lot of gunk. Now that it's all clean, I want to try a little retro bright. I normally pop the little Apple logos off of these things before I do this, but this one is already pretty sun-faded and weird, so I'm not going to bother. I'll throw it in here for 24 hours. While it's in there, let's get the electronics squared away. Since I don't trust the power supply, I'm going to try something new. My friend Ron from Ron's Computer Videos has been cooking up a lot of stuff lately. One of his new things is a modern power supply replacement for the LC machines. It's based on a Pico PSU, which gets powered by regular 12-volt power brick. This unit isn't available to the public yet, but it will be soon. First things first, I need to design a little bracket so I can slot this guy in where the original PSU goes. I'll do that in Onshape. I start by making a rough model of the original PSU so I get all the dimensions right and can give my unit receptacles for the plastic clips on the case. Now I'll model the new board in Pico PSU for virtual test fitting. Finally, I'm ready to build the mounting plate. Let's get it printed. About 2 hours later, it's time to start assembling. I like to use heat set inserts for the screws. It's a much more robust connection than screwing directly into the plastic. Plus, if I have to swap the board out in the future, the metal threaded holes will survive much better than just having some plastic screw holes deteriorate every time. The LC2 case is too disgusting to mess with right now, so I'm going to test fit it in my LC475. Perfect fit. Can't believe I got it all on the first try. Time to scavenge the logic board power connector from the original PSU. Yeah, this thing is gross. This new power supply board has screw terminals and solder points for the wires. I'm opting to use the screw terminals here. Just got to make sure I get each wire hooked up to the right voltage rail. Now I'm going to solder a little power switch to some DuPont wires. After checking to see that all the voltage rails are going to the right spots on the connector, it's time to see if it works. Looking good. Let's see if it powers up my 475. Working great. Time to remove the caps from the LC2 board. Some of you out there aren't going to like the method I use here, but you'll just have to get over it because it's what works for me. I push down on the top of the cap and use some pliers to twist the cap. Contrary to what people say, this does not twist the cap off the board. This twists the metal can off the legs. The legs stay on the pads and are removed later with an iron. I've repaired tons of boards with this method and have never messed up a pad doing it. If this method doesn't work for you, that's fine, but it's what I do. Once all 17 caps are off the board, it's time to clean the pads. I do this with solder braid. It does a good job of soaking up the residual solder, pulling the remnants of the legs off, and cleaning each pad with an abrasive action. While we're here, let's deal with the rusty video connector. Sometimes when removing things with a desoldering gun, it can be helpful to add fresh solder first to help spread the heat around. Nice. Now let's put the new one on. Look at the brand name for this new connector. Much better. Now that it's all clean and capless, let's fire it up and see what we're working with. Might surprise you, but a lot of these machines will power up and work fine without caps. The only thing that won't work is the sound. Look at that, we've got a working machine. Let's try booting it from a blue SCSI. Alright, SCSI's working too. Remember when I said it appeared that Apple may have planned to have an FPU available for this machine as an option? Well, I have one and a socket, so let's clear these holes and pop a socket in there. Time to install the caps. I ordered this set of capacitors from Console 5. It's pretty typical to replace the original electrolytics with tantalum capacitors. They won't ever leak, so when these caps eventually fail in the future, at least they won't damage the whole board. It's always important to check your work before turning anything on. Look closely to make sure you didn't put anything on backwards. Remember, if you use tantalums, the line on the capacitor marks the positive end, unlike pretty much every other type of capacitor where the line marks the negative. And this one's on backwards. Good thing I checked my work. Let's fix it. There we go. Let's throw some more RAM in here and fire it up. Nice, it chimes. Let's run some tests. Not bad. As mentioned earlier, another selling point of the LC was that at launch, Apple made an Apple IIe compatibility card available for it, so schools could slot an LC into the place of an old Apple II and still be able to run older education software. I've got one here. Let's hook it up and see how it works. If you went to school in the US during the 80s or 90s, you probably encountered this game that I'm using to test booting up with. Let's try a less common one. So my favorite machine from this era is the Macintosh II-CI. It has a 68030 just like the LC2 does, but it's a 25 MHz part instead of 16 MHz. It also has expansion slots and a full 32-bit data path. Let's run some benchmarks to see what kind of performance paying double in 1992 would have gotten you. Well, that looks about right. Let's pull the case out of the Retro Bright bin and see if I messed it up. Looks like everything goes back together nicely without the rusty RF shields. So what's the conclusion? Was the LC II crummy? Well, yeah. When compared to the machines that cost twice as much it was. When you look at how it doesn't improve upon the first one in any way other than on paper, sure. But a lot of what makes it crummy didn't really matter back then. It was the first color Mac that regular people could afford, and it made its way into tons of homes and schools, paving the way for actually good affordable home Macs for the future. The first two LCs walked so the Performas and Power Macs could run. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in watching me do more stupid stuff with computers, stay tuned.